Getting into something new has always been difficult for me. It didn't matter how often someone would say something is really good, it usually took a strong recommendation from family, friends, or reviewers I trust to get me to try something. That was the case for today's subject, where the only reason I even knew about it was because of Red from Overly Sarcastic Productions talking about it once on one of their trope talks, going into the state of the main character for about a minute or so. I was a bit curious at the time, and after learning that this series was helmed by Guillermo Del Toro, I had to check it out. And after finishing it, I've got a few things to say, both good and bad, as we dive into the Netflix original series known as Trollhunters. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. We've actually got a good chunk to talk about here, since I'll admit before we even start things off that I've watched the entirety of this series. And while I will be talking about bits and bobs throughout all of its 3 seasons, let me assure you here that I'm not going to be going super in-depth on this one. This will be mostly about my general thoughts and opinions on the series. Though please, if you want me to get a bit more detailed about this series, or anything else in a future episode, be sure to tell me. My comments, Twitter feed, and Discord are always open, links down below. Getting into things proper, the story of Trollhunters stars Jim Lake Jr., a young high school kid who's got a lot of the traditional setup. He's a bit of a dreamer, has a high school bully, girl he's got a crush on, and a nerdy best friend who's always there for him. Having what could be called a normal high school life, Jim here constantly wishes for something more, to have things be more exciting than they currently are within his home of Arcadia. He gets that wish as on his way to school one day, he hears a mystical voice calling out to him, leading to a pile of rubble and a glowing amulet. By reciting the phrase upon it,
"For the glory of Merlin, daylight is mine to command,"
he gets a fancy suit of armor and a sword made out of daylight. And then he gets introduced to Blinkus, Galandrical, and Arg, with 3 R's, 2 trolls that then dub Jim as the Troll Hunter, a defender who protects the balance between trolls and humans while hunting down the evil trolls that would disrupt that balance. Joined by his best friend Toby, Crush Claire, and the 2 trolls, and you get an animated series about a young teen growing up into being a hero. And as a story about that concept, it's actually pretty decent, getting to see these characters change and grow. Perhaps what stands out most about the series and makes it entertaining though, is when they're able to dive deep into the history of the trolls, about their lore and background, and how their society as a whole functions. One of the better moments that really shows this off, for example, is seeing the training center for the Troll Hunter, where statues of the previous holders of the title are placed after they pass away. Few things are better in this show when you're learning about what makes the trolls or their enemies tick. But you remember that traditional setup I talked about before? I didn't do that for just a one-off joke. I did this because when we are with Jim, Toby, and the other human characters, it plays out like every other kid-turned-superhero franchise that's out there that isn't named Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You get the story of a kid who's thrown into these situations he's not ready for, and a world he doesn't understand, having to be one step behind each and every episode. He tries his best to get to know the girl he likes, deals with an overly macho bully who's also a jock, and has the problem of balancing his school and home life with that of his life as a hero. And that's not to say that you can't ever do these classic tropes in a TV series. Other shows have done this just fine. The problem comes with how by the numbers Trollhunters can be. Let me give a few examples that you'll probably have seen in a lot of other shows. How about an episode where a character gets an item or spell put on them that changes their personality? Trollhunters has this as one of its episodes. One of the characters pretending to be a ruler of a more primitive tribe of characters and the power going to his head? That's included as well. An episode where the character has copies of themselves that all have different emotions and they're all going wild. Check, check, and triple check. It's this and a lot of other instances within Trollhunters that brought it down for me personally. Now, this is not to say that it's a bad thing. Not everyone is going to have seen the shows I have seen or seen these storylines before. And, in fact, I would say this would be a wonderful series to expose those tropes to a new generation. My major problem with these is the fact that they're played so completely straight, and no one other than the main character and his inner circle know the truth about what happened. Let me give another example from the Disney cartoon Kim Possible. In the second episode of the show's third season, there's a device that one of the generic scientists of the series creates called a modulator. When placed upon someone's body, the device's user has complete and total control over that character's emotions, with our main hero Kim and her villainous counterpart Shigo both being affected by it throughout the majority of the episode. This takes that trope of emotional copies I talked about before and does something different with it, playing with the idea that has been done so often by taking it into new directions, and in the case of Shigo, playing it explicitly for comedy. That's not to say that Trollhunters doesn't do this at all, but it's something I couldn't help but notice when these episodes came around, how it felt like I was watching something back in the 90s as a kid. The episode where Jim wears an amulet that takes away his fear and made him an overly brave jerk reminded me a lot of the events of the Spider-Man animated series and the introduction of the Venom symbiote. With that said though, I think the strength of the series hinges more on the characters than the plot of the story itself. While the cast all very much goes through the same story beats that we've seen time and again, they do grow and develop as their own characters. We see Blinky care for Jim as a son, being there to support and comfort. We see how Toby and Arg become close enough to become brothers, doing anything they can to support each other. We even see Claire grow and develop herself, becoming more capable as a hero alongside the rest of the cast. Even the secondary villains get a bit of growth and change, with a number of them aligning themselves with the heroes in the end. In fact, I would honestly say that the creators themselves realize they care for the characters more than the story. One of the things that became noticeable to me was how certain events would happen, but we would never see the consequences, or things were deemed unimportant were skipped over entirely. One of the best examples would be the end of one episode where Jim was dropped into this dark abyss known as the Deep, that has never had anyone ever escape from it. The only thing that we really get to see with him down there is fighting what looks to be an evil troll version of himself. Then, in the start of the next episode, we see Jim climbing out of the abyss. We never see him defeating his dark copy, we never see what made the abyss so hard to escape, and we never see just how long it took him to get back up. It was like the creators took us aside and said, "Look, we know he's gonna get out, you know he's gonna get out, so let's save ourselves the budget and you the time and say he got out." To be fair to the series, I do like the idea of cutting down on the moments that I don't think would be important to a character. If the creators don't have anything but overbloated action sequences that does nothing to further along the story or the characters we've come to love, then streamlining these isn't a bad decision. But there's a difference between doing that, cutting away some foregone conclusion, and completely destroying any of the tension that a series has. And sorry to say that Trollhunters, more than once, has done that in an effort to get back to the characters. I think one of the major reasons it throws me off so much is because of what I come to expect from Del Toro as a producer. When you slap Del Toro's name on something, you expect the unusual, the bizarre, dark colors and darker characters like things from Hellboy or the original Pacific Rim. Trollhunters lacks this, and while it's by no means a bad series, it's a disconnect that I felt as someone who has watched a number of his films. One of the major reasons I wanted to talk about Trollhunters is that despite the weird choices it made with both story and pacing, is that the characters are solid, and when you focus on the stories of the trolls, their world, and all the little pieces that make it up, it can be more than enjoyable. If I could have gotten a show that was just focused on Blinky and Arg alone, I'd be happy. Mind you, I've kind of always behind a character who's voiced by Kelsey Grammer, especially in a show that's aimed for kids. That's a voice that never goes out of style. I'd say that if you wanted to watch a show about a kid becoming a hero that has a little bit of hidden depth to it, Trollhunters is a good watch. I'd suggest avoiding the movie connected to it, as it not only requires knowledge of the other two series that Trollhunters is connected to, Three Below and Wizards, but from what I've been told, it's kind of yikes. Regardless, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do so again in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with my content by subscribing and doing all the other things it gives us YouTubers life. If you wish to support me a bit more, I do have a Patreon where you can get access to bonus content. But until next time, stay frosty.